Hi, Whitehot here from the Black Chair. Today we are speaking to Eve Dembowski, who describes parts of herself as an astrologer and teacher of traditional astrology. And she works with the plant kingdom. Astrology has taken Eve down the path of philosophy, and combined with the flower essences she works with, it has given Eve a much broader view of body, soul, spirit, and life itself. So let's meet Eve and see what this is all about. Hi Eve.
Hi Valtrout.
Well, we have had a bit of technical struggle. I think that's a good thing to actually preempt this straight away.
Yep.
Because I notice it in my body, how I'm a little bit feeling now anxious because we wanted to get going and we are already now behind schedule.
Behind schedule, yes.
Which means the day will be behind. And so please say something meaningful why it happened.
Well, as an astrologer, Mercury is retrograde, and I actually, the kind of astrology that I tend to do more than anything now is what's called horary astrology, which is horary astrology,
Okay.
which is different to natal astrology. It's really the astrology of the moment. So a person asks a question, and once the question is understood, if it meets certain criteria, which we can get into, you set a chart for that moment and you get an answer. But it also opens up this whole thing that every moment is quite unique. And the first thing I did when you asked me, to come today, I thought, okay, well, it'll be interesting to see what the chart of the moment that we had set, even though it's a little bit later than that moment now, what that chart looks like. And of course, what we had was on the MC, which is the highest point in the sky, literally on the ecliptic, we had Mercury retrograde on the MC. And Mercury retrograde, Mercury is the trickster. Mercury is the one that's going to cause trouble with anything with technology, communication, anything like that. When Mercury is retrograde, it tends to cause problems. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it brings information back to us because it is about information as well. But it is, I just had to chuckle as we were going through all this technical, we were having issues and trying to push buttons and get things going. I thought it seemed quite appropriate.
How interesting. That, because you said a couple of things. Well, one I'm only noticing now, and that wasn't planned. We have had a Jungian interview with Kaya Pripik, a Jungian analyst, who Jung was also very interested in the mysticism and the planets and the underworld.
Yep.
So that's one aspect which just comes to mind now in this moment, and the other is this moment. Like when I'm looking through a Gestalt therapy lens, or I guess therapist period, the moment is so important.
Yes.
More so like what's happening now, right this moment. I'm nervous, I'm sitting here, I'm supposed to be this wonderful host and relaxed and all in control and have all the questions.
Yes.
And that is not matching the outside necessarily, the inside.
Yeah.
But I notice also it does match it if I give voice to it. Then something happens to, I can be a bit more
relaxed in it. Yeah. Well, I think, what astrology does, and I did actually listen to Kaya's interview. It was very interesting. And when I first started to learn astrology, I learned modern astrology, which is some people refer to as psychological astrology. I often say it's very a la Liz Green astrology. And Liz Green is actually a Jungian analyst. And she's,
Can you say a little bit what is meant by psychological astrology? And
Yep, I will. So psychological, well, I suppose you've got to go way back. Remember, astrology is incredibly ancient, which is something that I was drawn to. Now, I can understand that through my own chart, that I like to dig deep and far into the roots of things. But astrology's been around for a long time. And then at one point, which is really when what they refer to as the Enlightenment, or the age of reason or the age of science sort of took over. We went from a paradigm of reality which was based on, in a sense, the non-material, essential, actually spiritual kind of, that was the understood to be the root of life. Whereas once the Age of Enlightenment, we became focused on the material. So materialism became the actual, what was real.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is something like...
So one could feel and see,
yeah,
measure.
and you could measure it, and you can categorize it,
Yes.
and you could say, right, this is what it's about.
Yes.
So astrology has a real hard time fitting into that paradigm. Because, yes, there's parts of it that can. You can look up in the sky, you can measure where things are, and this became astronomy. Mm-hmm. So astronomers now, they calculate all sorts of stuff, they create all these fancy, incredible technology to be able to see far away, but it's all very material. And astrology can't really fit there, so it had to reinvent itself. And in the 19th century, it kind of reinvented itself through a lot of the mystery schools, which got a little bit, as I say, oogledy-boogledy. Mm-hmm. Some of it I find a little bit, well, that's just my own judgment. I find some of it not really that valid, but...
And I guess that was also the time where the reluctance of Freud, having this sense that he would become a laughingstock by tackling mysticism.
Exactly,
Mysticism
yeah.
was
so it was kind of, it was put off, and as a result, you get some very interesting characters that were, to some degree, made fun of. But out of that, you did also have people like Jung, and Jung actually was interested in astrology because he was interested in symbolism.
I just want to say, I am not here to this is not about Jung. You know,
Yeah.
I just noticed that I am saying that for the second time, and there's a connection
Oh,
to
absolutely.
Jung. It just
Yeah.
happens to that it fits.
Yeah.
So I'm not a Jungian. I have not studied Jung in a great
Yeah.
deal. I know bits and pieces. It comes in from different sides, and that's part of that.
the whole
So,
thing.
yeah,
That's
the whole
right.
thing. So I just thought
I absolutely,
absolutely,
but you know, it is quite interesting that Jung, because he worked with symbols and he saw astrology, which is basically an incredibly powerful symbolic language, but it's more than that. So modern astrology took its cue, I suppose, or it decided, well, I don't know if decided is quite the word, but it developed this idea of, you know, first of all, there were legal reasons as well, because astrology was actually illegal. Like, you know, fortune telling was illegal. You could actually be jailed for it. So that was another reason, that it had to reinvent itself and become character analysis. So this is where this idea of, well, you can understand your character. And it got a little bit more involved, and you can look at the psychology using someone's natal chart. But for me, as an astrologer, I found that wasn't very satisfying after a while. I mean, it was fascinating in the beginning, and then it was like, but surely that's not what astrology is about. It's been around for thousands of years. I mean, we can only self-reflect our belly button and look at our chart and talk about ourselves for so long. And then it's like, well, there's got to be more to it. Going into the tradition, you start to find that there's a lot more to it. And I remember being at a lecture in, I think, 2000 with a very well-known astrologer named Rob Hand, and he, in his very bombastic way, said, well, if you really want to learn astrology, you're going to have to study some Plato and Aristotle. And I remember going, what? Oh my God.
I actually, when you started talking, I had this image constellating itself of this group of very laid-back Greeks, and in their cloth, and women and men and young people, and staring at the sky and talking and philosophizing.
Yeah, but a lot of it was also mathematics. In fact, the ancient Greek astrologers were referred to as mathematicians because, you know, astrology ends up being the root of so many sciences. medicine was steeped in astrological symbolism, and it's an amazing thing to look at. And I can tell a story of my own medical event that was, very clear in my chart, my solar return for that year, and fits in with the symbolism of medical astrology, which is quite ancient.
Now, somebody would say, right now, I'm kind of imagining, yeah, but we can make everything fit. Yeah,
Sure, absolutely, and that is why, as in any art, and here I will bring in the creative process, there are two things. There's the inspiration, which is just, you could say, intuitive, just playing with stuff. You do hats, play with materials. I do a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's just like being open to let whatever happen. However, you need to have some craft, and craft or technique is something you learn. It's like playing a musical instrument by ear. You can have a great ear and really be able to hear things, and you teach yourself. But if you don't have the theory and the technique behind you, you will hit a brick wall and you won't be able to climb it because you don't have the tools to do so. And astrology is exactly the same. There's a hell of a lot of astrologers or people that do astrology, that call themselves astrologers, that are, intuitive astrologers, that know a little bit. And it's like, but there is a technique to it. And if I can find your lost cat and tell you where it is and when it's coming back, that's because I've got the technique to do it.
Right.
I'm not intuiting it. I'm not, it's like there's a methodology. My tongue and my brain don't often they sort of don't kind of coordinate, so I mispronounce things.
Right. Now, Eve, that reminds me, what I am thrown back to think about what you're saying is that in order the creative process, because we all do things and we all are capable of doing things.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we do it in different ways. But the creative process, in order to you have to engage in it, so you have to do it.
Yes.
And then what you're saying is, comes the 10,000 hour theory. With 10,000 hours you are a master. So you need to true, not true.
Yeah.
But let's just, it sort
Yeah.
of floats around as a statement where we can hang our hat on.
That's
so
right.
to say.
Yes.
So, but that there's a practice we need, because from the practice we get techniques, and some learn faster, slower, and it's an ongoing learning.
It is.
And that we can express and engage deeper by having more skill.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, there was one thing I will use again, because I'm been reading so many ancient texts. I mean, they are translated, obviously, because I don't read ancient Greek or Latin, so I'm sort of relying on translations. But what the ancients would talk about is the science and the arts, and how they defined it to me was, when I read this, I went, aha, now I get it. So science is the study of something. You study something, whether it's studying how to make a hat or make a quilt or do astrology or whatever it is, it's the study of it. So it's that Saturnian, that discipline of putting yourself down, reading the text, trying to understand what it's about.
Which is not in my chart, is it?
I don't know. I haven't brought your chart
I don't
here.
think it is.
Yeah, well, maybe not. But we do it differently. I mean, people do it differently. We do learn differently. But that is the science part. And then the art is the doing. It's the practice. So that is where the art comes in. William Lilly was a 17th century astrologer, sort of a master hoary astrologer. This term was given to him after he died, right? And he was an amazing man, and he's got an amazing life, and he lived at an amazing time in the English history during the English Revolution and all of that. And he called himself a student of astrology, and he referred to his astrologers as artists. The artist will blah, 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 in his book, which is written in English, so I have read the original of that one. And to me, that really rings true. And I try to instill that in my students, is I say, look, if I do a chart, If it comes to me, a horary chart is my chart. So you might come with a question. You've got a query, a problem in your life, and you need some kind of guidance or some kind of, am I going to get this job, or is this money going to come through in time? Whatever it is. And it's something that is a true necessity to kind of know, or at least have some guidance as to what you could do to make, things work out for you, whatever it is. Once I understand the ins and outs of this dilemma, I go, okay, all right, I understand. Then I set the chart. Now, that chart is my chart because I'm the one who's going to be judging it. But what it represents is what the cosmos are presenting to you through me, through me being able to interpret it. But it's what you need to know at this moment in time. And that moment, you can actually feel it in your body. As an astrologer, there's sometimes I'll be with a client and I feel that moment. This is the moment.
Now, what you are saying, you're speaking to something I can relate to. What happens in the therapy room or with my children or when I teach a class, I used to believe it's all me. It's all, I'm so smart. It's all me.
Yeah.
Now I understand it comes through me. And that I really have to trust that process. And that when I'm sitting with a client, that sometimes things come in. I'm feeling it in my body. And the tricky part for a therapist is what part do I say and what do I hold?
Absolutely.
And how do you, what is relevant now here? What's the gold? And what might only be a precursor or a warning or a wondering or something which needs to be held rather than blur.
Yeah. And look, this is interesting because, again, I will tell students to actually judge a horary chart's quite easy. There's a technique to it. Yes, of course, you're working with the symbolism. It's like I say, charts will speak to you, and when they're really happening, they sing. You just look at it and you just know what it's about. That takes time and practice to get to that point, and study, and really engaging with the symbolism. But this is a chart.
So you've brought a chart.
Yeah, so I brought a chart. So this is, I don't know where to do it, but so this is a chart. It just looks like a bunch of symbols. But each one of these symbols is actually representing something that has a conscious life. That's how I have approached it and understood it. So when I said Mercury was retrograde and caused problems, I'm not just saying, Mercury is this. Mercury is a consciousness of some sort. It's an intelligence.
So the way we are influenced by, one morning we wake up feeling one way and another, nothing really happened, but we feel different, and then we are thinking it has to belong to something I ate or I said or I didn't get or I'm longing for. It's that?
Well, yeah, but often it's not. I think the thing about what I love about astrology, and what I think the reason I sort of started to move away from the more modern type of astrology, which is very psychologically based, and get more into the traditional, and that opened up things. First of all, it opened up, one of the biggest things for me was the understanding of what is the soul.
What do you understand the soul is?
Okay, well, I'm beginning to really take this on. So Plato, and many others since, and probably before him, spoke of the three, or the tripartite soul, which is the three levels of the soul, or the three souls that are one, which sounds a bit familiar. Three is one.
Didn't Jung say something about that?
He probably did.
I read something.
Yeah. Well, he did. I think Jung talked about the consciousness, the superconscious, and I'm not sure. I'm not a Jungian, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah. But anyway, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, but this 3 in 1 idea is something that comes often, and I suppose.
Yeah, the 3 comes often. Catholic, right?
Yeah, the 3 in 1, the God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But basically, this idea of the three levels of the soul, or the three souls as one. So you've got the vegetative soul. They've got different names, but the vegetative soul is basically the biology. It's our body. And so for me, as I said, I had a particular, I had a brain tumor, which I had to have a surgery on. And when that happened, it really made me think about a lot of things, and it changed me immensely. But it was about, okay, so this part of my soul is reflecting something.
The thinking changed you, not the fact that you had a brain tumor. Not the fact that you had one and what you could learn and do with that. That's what changed you. Not you weren't impacted by.
Well, other than I don't hear out of one side, and
So
I'm
the
a little
hearing.
bit, and I'm a little bit wobbly. And as I
Okay.
say to my kids, I'm high all the time.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
I'm just that little bit happy all
Okay.
the time. But no, I do have to watch that I don't trip,
It's a
because
nice disposition to have,
yeah,
to be a little bit.
a little bit.
I'm a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. So there's the vegetative soul is the soul that is the biology. It is, if you think about your body and you think your body does all this stuff, you don't have to make it. You don't have to think through, go, okay, now it's time for me to digest my food.
Yes.
It just does it.
Yes.
And it has this intelligence.
Yes.
And obviously when something goes wrong, it's because it's like going, hello, hello, listen
help
to me.
here.
I need help.
Yeah.
Stop eating the stuff that's
Yeah.
making it difficult for me
Yeah.
to do my job.
Can you sleep a bit more?
More
I can't think. I'm
That's
shaking.
right, yeah.
I'm too angry.
Yeah. Well, no, the angry and the emotions, that is the animal soul. And that's what most of us function on. We function in that. It's our feelings, our emotions,
Which
it's
we
our
would
reaction.
call the reptile brain.
Maybe, yep.
as-
It was just, and it's our instinct. It's like we just feel something, I'm fearful, I'm going to run. That's the animal soul that is responding.
that flight.
That
flight.
that comes into
Freeze.
it, but also our feelings, like, oh, I think that person doesn't like me, and they said this. Do they? Oh, am I too fat? Whatever it is, those thoughts that make us feel things, and why is this happening? No, I don't want this. That's the animal. Part of that, the ego can come into it because we start to not associate, but identify with those feelings, and they become much more real.
Which we would sort of, it's also, I understand that as fixed, a fixed belief, or something which might be very helpful in younger years, keeps us surviving, like
Yeah.
the animal instinct,
Yeah.
what you're talking about. And then, but we then become so rigid, I believe that to be true because
Yeah.
it was true back then,
Back
so
then.
it's still true
Today, yeah. So, and then the final one is what they would call the human soul, or the rational soul. And that is, that's actually where Mercury comes in, because Mercury, astrologically speaking, and I heard Kaya talk about Hermes, who is Mercury, and Hermes could go up to the heavens and down into the underworld. And that is true. Mercury can go through all this. But Mercury...
So Mercury goes to the dark places, to the Nigredo, as she spoke about.
Exactly.
Goes to the light, what she finished off with her
Yes.
poetry.
Yeah.
So we can be in deep despair and sad, and then we can...
Yeah. So the deep despair, say, very often people will have a disappointment. And recently, my son, Sebastian, had a disappointment in that they realized they can't move back to Thailand where they've been living because of the COVID-19. And I had told him when I looked at his solar return chart, which is a technique of looking at
Yeah.
a chart for your birthday when the sun returns. And I said, well, it's not going to be a bad year, actually. There's going to be some good stuff. It's going to be kind of hard because Saturn was in charge. But basically, the main thing is you're not in the driver's seat this year. You are like in the back seat, and it's going to take you wherever it's going to take you, and you're not in control this year. And that's exactly what's happened.
And that is universally...
Well, for him specifically, because yeah,
specifically for
yeah,
him.
yeah.
But it feels like 2020 is Mercury flooded.
Well, yes. Well, there's a lot of big stuff happening. One of the big things that's happening, and this is just what we call mundane astrology,
Yeah.
which is the big things that are going to affect everyone. I mean, look, there's these outer planets that a lot of people will talk about, but I will say that there's this 20-year cycle of Saturn and Jupiter coming together. Every 20 years they come together at the same degree. And for about 240 years, they come together in a particular element, right? And you can kind of look through history and see, well, it started coming together in earth element around the time of the Industrial Revolution, when we started to, build factories and,
clock on and clock off.
on, clock
Get
off,
the school
exactly.
system happening.
Yeah,
so that
mechanical time and all
working.
that. And in 1980, so that was, there's a little period. There's the shift to the next element. There's usually it goes into the next element and then goes back into the old one, and then finally goes back. And then for the next 240 years, we're in the new element. So there's a shift period, which is, of course, could be a lifetime, could be 40, 60 year period, which we've lived through. So 1980, it went into an air sign for the first time. And that's interesting because in the 80s, from 80 to 2000 was when computers were invented, personal computers, the internet started, which is all very air. It's about information, about communication and all that. Then it went back into Earth in 2000. So, boom, back into Earth. And now, 2020, I think it's on the just early December, I'm not sure the exact date, we have the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And then from now on, it's going to be in Earth, in air.
And that means what in layman's terms?
It means that there's a big shift in mundanely on the planet. It's like we are changing our ideas. I mean, it's very interesting to see what's happening in America with the Black Lives Matter and, these big protest movements that have been taken up by a whole lot of other places, and things are being
lifted up.
And
so
like,
white
this is
supremacy,
wrong.
black movement, gender diversity, it seems to be for the first time in my lifetime
really taking on
it
life.
doesn't seem it's going to go away. We cannot ignore it anymore.
And I would say that COVID-19
has helped it
in a way, because it's like, well, we're all in this together. We can't escape this. It's like, it's not about, well, if you're rich, you're not going to get it, or that's somehow going to protect you. I mean, obviously the poor and those that are at disadvantage are more at risk, obviously, but that has become even starker. So, and air is about, well, Aquarius particularly is about, the collective, the fairness of the collective. So, it is quite interesting that, you can see these big things in astrology, but that's on a mundane level. And then you've got the individual, which obviously each one of us has our own individual little path in this. And some of us, this is going to be a lot harder than others. So some people are doing it really, really hard. And some people, it's actually freeing them. It's like, I like working from home, and this is great, and it's creative. It's opened up a way of creatively looking at their lives and doing things differently. But for some, it's been really, really difficult. So that would be their individual, what's going on individually.
That's interesting when you with the some people. I find I have that in the therapy room. And with friends, that there is a different degree of how people deal with it. And what I am wondering, do you think if it has got to do with, I mean, obviously for you it's lots with planets and astrology. I look at it from a character or who we are in essence, or thinking we are one thing and then we're realizing we're actually another. That, that some people find they get energized by people, but actually they get drained and realize now with sitting at home, they have a lot of energy because they are not being sucked dry by people.
Yes. And look, from an astrological perspective, everything I'm hearing, like when I listened to Kaya and you guys were speaking, I mean, my astrology brain goes, oh yeah, well that's Saturn. Oh, that's the Jupiter.
Ah.
You know, so you can, in a way, it's like, well, take Venus. So this is an interesting thing I thought
Which
about.
I understand is love.
Well, Venus is love, but it's also creativity, and it's about, you know, Venus is wanting to bring beauty and harmony into the world.
So it's the
love
life
is part of that.
It's the life force is bringing forth the new life,
and
creation.
it's reconciliation or it's bringing together. It's about relationship. So love comes into it, but also, you know, if somebody makes a beautiful, you know, bowl, and you know this has been made. This is Venus. Now this bowl now exists. It creates its own beauty, and it helps to make the environment just that much more special. The person having a, you know, drink of water from this, there's an enjoyment. That's Venus, because
Totally.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah. So Venus is about, it's the sensual as well. So it comes, you know, a lot of people think Mars is sex because it's got this arrow and it's like, that must be sex. No, it's Venus. It's the desire and pleasure. So Venus has a lot going for it. Now, just interestingly, I was thinking about this in the car on the way here, that my youngest daughter, who you know, is someone who's got 5 major planets in Scorpio. She's a very Scorpio kind of person. Venus is in Scorpio. Meaning that, you know, Scorpio, they tend to be dark. Well, according to the popular press, they're, you know, dark and suspicious, and, you know, they've got a bad reputation. I love Scorpio.
I hear, the thing what comes up for me, Scorpio, deadly sting.
Yeah, exactly. And usually that deadly sting is to them rather than to others. But it can come out when, you know, they have that sting. Scorpio is ruled by Mars, right? So there's a very Mars is about going after things. It's about, it's discernment as well. So Mars will cut away, like pruning your garden. That's very Mars. You're doing it and you're cutting, but it's going to make things rejuvenating. So you need all of these things. So
you
even though they're not as
branches, we need to see what is useful. Also, again, psychologically, if I think about that, we need to prune away what is not useful.
Yeah, exactly. It may have been useful last year. Dead wood, and now we can get rid of it. And maybe it'll be of use somewhere else, but we can get rid of it. So looking at her chart, there's certain traditional techniques where they would look at particular planets in a chart, and I won't go into it technically, but basically they would identify a planet, and it was referred to as the almutant of the figure. And that planet signified, it was often referred to as your guardian daemon. And you told this beautiful story when you first went into the hat shop and you suddenly blurted out you need an apprentice.
Came through me.
It came through. That was your guardian daemon speaking. Right? That is the people have like where did that come from? I didn't mean to say that. I had no thought to say it. It didn't come from my own consciousness, but it came from deep within, and it guided you to a whole new, you know, path in your life.
By trusting and going with it, and not fibbing it off.
Yeah.
Because
not editing.
Not editing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's the ego.
Yes.
That edits, thinks it's in control.
Like to have a yes rather than, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
It's sort of a yes attitude. Yeah. Let's see where that takes me.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, things come out. And so this guardian daemon, I tried to explain to Juliet when I was looking at it in her own specific chart. And I said, well, interestingly enough, I would have thought Mars because of all that Scorpio, but no, it's actually Venus. Venus is in her 5th house, which is the house of creativity and children, but it's your own creation. So she's doing, I said, so the more you work with Venus in your life, the more clear your path will be. For me, it's Jupiter, and it's in the 3rd house, which part of that is communication. And the more I do Jupiter, the clearer my path becomes.
And that's birth charts you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so that reminds me of, if I can sort of root this back and bring this a bit grounded.
Yeah.
In positive psychology, it reminds me of Seligman, what you just said. And there, years ago in the 80s, or not 80s actually, a bit later. It became very popular. Martin Seligman.
No,
Martin Seligman is a psychologist, American, and
Okay.
he is coined the grandfather of positive psychology, and he started looking at what works. Positive psychology being what is positive in people, rather than looking at what doesn't work and what do we need to fix.
That was right. Yes.
Gestalt is not looking at that at all, and I'm just reminded, because he developed a 24 strength chart, and he says in that chart, if we and that is a chart which, it doesn't matter how much we work it, will not make a big change.
Right.
We have strength from 1 to 24.
Right.
And if we are working on those, and there's tests you can do, you can jump online and you can do a test.
Okay.
Takes 20 minutes. And then you find your top strength, and we find all 24 strengths, but he says, if you work on the 5 top strengths, then you will be in flow and you find your way through, than rather looking at what you are not good at down there in, what we say, I'm not good, I'm weak. They're just not my top strength. So rather have an awareness around them. So if I know I am a spontaneous, what's the, when you buy 3 pairs of shoes instead of one. Impulse.
Impulsive.
So if your passivity is 23, 24, and you walk into a shop and you're aware of that, and you walk in and you go, oh my God, they are on special, I might as well buy them in each color.
Right.
You might remind, oh that's right, I'm 24 in my
impulse control.
Impulse control, and that I need to maybe not buy them, and go back to whatever the top thing is.
Okay, so impulse control, and that's very much a Mars thing. And I suppose that when you're looking from an astrological perspective, like I said, you can translate a lot of this stuff into astrospeak. But I want to come back to something which for me is more profound with astrology, and what I find coming back to that idea of the moment, and how incredibly profound that moment can be. So I run weekly, what I call open chart nights for people, and we've been doing it on Zoom lately, obviously.
I want to join.
Yeah, okay. And basically, a lot of the people that come, we just look at any chart, and it's really open. I don't care. People can be very modern or traditional, or doesn't make any difference. But once a month, we have a specifically horary night. So only looking at horary charts. And most
it's your students.
That's most of them are my students. Some of them are people that are like interested and might become my students. And the other night we had a horary night, and one of the participants brought a chart, and the question was, is my father's health okay? So I think he's probably in his early 40s. I assume his parents are in their 70s, maybe getting close to 80. I'm not sure.
Oopsie-daisy, there's just a shelf fallen off the chair. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. It was a little bit...
But that's the moment.
Yes, the moment,
so we are really being interrupted today by Mercury.
Mercury is...
on many fronts, but are we rattled?
No, not at all. We just have to make friends. That's right, in the moment. So anyway, so he brings this chart to the group, and people are looking at it, and I'm letting them discuss it. And finally I said, well, okay, you're my students, which house represent father? So we started looking at it, and it looked like his father was fine. But the story that comes out from it is not so much about his father, but it was clear that his mother had had some health issues, quite serious ones, and she is not well, and he was concerned. What really comes out, and it's clear in the chart, is that he was concerned that if his father got ill, he wouldn't be able to look after his mother, and then it would be put onto him. So ultimately it was like, well, actually you are, the querent. You can identify who it is in the chart. And if we look at this chart, it's really talking about you and about your fears, about how would you deal with this situation? I think his father will be fine. So we were all like, your father's going to be fine, but you've really got to start opening up that conversation with both your parents as to what would happen if something, because it's inevitable.
Yeah.
They're going to get old, and hey, something's going to happen.
Well, they actually will die.
They will,
And so
absolutely.
will we.
Yeah,
And so will everyone else.
exactly. But for him, it's about what's going to happen if one of them needs the kind of care that he wouldn't physically be able to, or practically be able to give. So these are things that need to be talked about. So from this chart, it was actually quite profound, and he realized, it's got nothing really to do with my father, this question. It's about me.
That is what I wanted to interject here. Seems to be such a complementary way of doing therapeutic exploration of anything. It has such similarities to being in a therapy room. This is what you do. You explore. You have a question. You wonder what it is about. And I think the core is the wondering, the question. You gotta have a question.
Yeah.
And then you walk around that question and you lift it up somehow, or look at it from many, many different ways.
Right. There's a man who lived in the 13th century, astrologer named Guido Bonatti. And Bonatti...
Italian?
He was Italian, yes. And it was actually, he's often referred to as Bonatus because it was in the Latin version. But he left this great work, and part of it, there is a section which is the 146 considerations. Now, considerations are things, and the word consideration means to consider the stars. It's with the stars, with stars. So, but the considerations are things to think about. And, I love reading them, but the first one is about the question, because let's face it, in the past, most astrologers would have done a type of horary, because most people didn't know their birth date, often, their birth time, forget about it, So they would have gone to an astrologer with an issue. Look, I'm about to enter into battle with, Count so-and-so. Am I going to win? Or what's going to happen? Look at the chart. Tell me. But his first consideration was about the question, the moment of the question. And he said, in order for the question, there are three motions. It has to do with the motion of the soul. Again, this three. So the first is the movement of the soul of the querent, who is moved to ask. They need to know something. The second is the motion of the superior bodies that will be in a certain formation in order to allow the question to be answered.
Which some people would call the guides.
It could be the guides, the planets, the cosmos, whatever, that thing which is, beyond us.
The life situations around us.
Well, it goes beyond that, It is, literally, the superior bodies are the planets, and they're going to be in a certain constellation in a certain place in the zodiac in order to provide the answer that is needed for the querent whose soul has moved him to ask. But then there's a third motion, and that is the motion of the free will. And the free will is in part, like it is part of the querents, because the querent may have a question, but choose not to actually go to an astrologer and ask it. Therefore, it's
or not ask it at all.
Or not ask it at all, exactly. So therefore, it just doesn't happen. But the free will is also the will of the astrologer. That's how I've come to understand it, that there's a three-way street here. There's the querent, there's the cosmos, and there's the astrologer. So if someone comes to me with a question, and I feel for whatever reason that I don't want to make a judgment on that, it doesn't feel right for me to do that. I don't have to. I can choose with my free will to not answer the question, to say whatever, say, look, I'm sorry, I can't do it, I've got...
Same as in the therapy room.
Exactly.
People come with a question, they often want the answer, they think you have the magic wand.
You don't.
And, they expect to walk away with answers.
Yeah.
And which is, as we know, we do not know the answers
No.
to questions.
Exactly. I mean, you can have, I mean, I suppose, like, if I think I've had a few, like, people have lost their pets. And I remember there was this woman came to the door and she was in distress. Her cat, she thought it had gotten hit by a car. She saw it running under a parked car, and by the time she got there, the cat was gone, and she was going around to all the houses saying, is the cat in your yard or whatever. And I said, well, it's undoubtedly not in my yard, seeing as I've got 3 pussycats of my own who probably would not want to come here. But I invited her in, gave her a cup of tea because she was clearly upset. And in the end, I did a horary about where's my cat. And I saw the thing, and I remember saying to her, I mean, this was on the fly. So this is where, you're really working with the symbolism. And because I'd done...
intuition.
Well, it's what the symbolism is saying. Like the cat was Mercury, small animal, that makes sense. They wander around. But it was at 23 degrees of Libra, which I know is on a fixed star, which is Spica, which is a lucky star. So I said, well, your cat is a lucky cat, because I saw that. And then I could see that it was probably very close to her home. I described where I thought the cat might be, but we'll never know, because the cat came home 3 days later, like I told her, and she came to say, I was so impressed. It came home. But we'll never know where the cat was, because the cat didn't have anything to say about it.
And I am not sure what to make of this. Number one, we are totally running out of time, and I am so disappointed that we have to stop.
Yeah.
But the second thing, behind you, which you haven't seen, has just my cat walked past. She's now gone.
Oh, okay.
She does not come into the space, usually. When there's people here, she is very... I don't know what to make of it. I just noticed you speak about cats.
Cats, and there she
and
is.
Here she turns up, quite casually licking against something and rubbing. So the mysteries of
the universe,
we will not know.
We will not. And to me, I mean, I know we have to end it, which I think is really sad, because I've really enjoyed it. And we haven't even talked about the flower essences, but that's fine.
And I think I have to invite you back again, if you would maybe do that.
Sure.
Because I have the same affinity I felt with Kaya. I felt as excited speaking to her. And that we maybe, who knows where it leads, we've started it.
Yeah,
we have
let's
no
go
plan.
for it. Yeah.
Let's see what comes of it.
And you see, that's that trust. Just one last thing I'll say is fear. A fear of doing something. That's Saturn, which is saying, no, you can't. You've got this barrier. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. Talking about creativity, that Saturn can be, while it can discipline us to actually do things, it can also bring the barrier. And the opposite, or the flip side of that fear of doing something because I can't, is trusting.
Yes.
That it's okay.
And a little bit of courage.
Yeah, and that comes from Mars. That's the heart. Mars, just do it.
Yeah.
That idea, just do it.
Yeah. Let's see what happens.
And see what happens. Then call in Venus to help you enjoy the process, because Venus is about enjoying, like getting into all the paints and mushing in there, or doing whatever, stitching, whatever it is that you do. There's a pleasure in it.
Well, I have enjoyed it all.
Me too.
I have had to conquer up courage to do this, because I don't know a lot about astrology, and I have learned so much, and it gives me a lot of food for thought of how that fits with the work what I do. So thank you for the gift.
You're very welcome.
And that's it for today.